but the most negative imagery of all is a girl with her head in her hand like this, basically looking asleep. This says that the education is failing. Now, Lisa, do you have any idea what the best visualization, if this is the worst, what's the best visualization? You got it. It's the kid. It's the annoying kid that you kind of want to slap, who's waving their hand because they want to be recognized. That's success. Boredom is failure. Engagement is success. Remember that in your communication. In terms of nationalizing this, and I recognize education is a local issue, but the one thing that we all agree on, from the far left to the far right, a great country is great schools. And that's just a simple phrase. And if you are below average, and by the way, people want to be in the top fifth. They don't have to be number one or number two. But in terms of the country, if they're not in the top 10, they think they're failing. So if you're not in the top 10, you got something better to do. The challenge is being given to you to do better. But we all agree on the idea that we will not be an awesome country if we don't have awesome schools. Number 7, that idea of the back to basics is important. We're not looking for innovation. We're not looking for applying the latest technology. That's really not a priority to the average parent. They want their kids to be able to read, to write, to do math. And the only item that does really, really well that's outside the traditional learning is critical thinking. But it is such a priority. And so please keep that in mind as you're thinking about your curriculum. If we want to talk about merit pay, which I hope you do, the better way to communicate it is better pay for better teachers. Merit pay has been so demonized by the teachers' unions that we had to find a different approach. And the reason why better pay works so well is that it is for better teachers. And people know that in every occupation except for teaching, the better you are, the more money you make. That's why it's such a communicate that. 2 more. We've waited too long. The idea that we've been talking about good schools now, and it's not 50 years. It's now 60 years. We started this with Lyndon Johnson in 1965. And after 55 years, we are no better off. And in some communities, we're actually worse off. And that's what you talk about. It's a half century of having this discussion, and we are still failing. And the last thing, and by the way, I'm looking at Kay Christoph or whatever her name is. And I suddenly thought that Chris Christopherson was coming onto this Alec, and I thought he's dead. And if he's not dead, he's got to be close to dead because this guy drank until oblivion. That last one, results, not effort. I don't care. Nobody cares the work that you put into it. They only care that your students are prepared. And here's the phrase, that your students are prepared for college, career, and life. So with that, I'm going to stop for a second and I'll take a couple questions. Let me take this off screen so we can all see each other. Steve, can I see you? Stephen Roop, Robert Robinson, Courtney Cook, Alexis Jarrett. Guys, I want to be able to see you all. So please come then. Okay, Kay, I can see you now. And Kay, you're not a woman, you're a man. I'm shocked. Well, congratulations on that gender change. I will tell you that beard is fetching on you. Okay, let me, questions.
Hey, Frank, I have one.
I see your hand go up.
Thank you, Frank. So we had 4 years ago when I was in the Ways and Means, it was everything I could do just to stop this kind of budgetary formula for education, right? It was designed by the unions. It overloads. We also have a court case here where the Supreme Court is defining adequate and equitable. I was able to move through and just pull us off the formula and get into this block grant situation to where we could try to reset it. But then we lost at the ballot box, right? The unions came out strong. And this is so 4 years ago, all the left, they beat us and they put that same nasty formula back in place in Kansas. And it's that same, I'm struggling to find, I like the words. I don't know how to educate the people. I don't know how to get it out of our mouths and into the public because we lose at the media level.
I've got a 1 cent. I've got one sentence for you, and you guys are gonna get used to, I kind of jump the question, because when I know what it is, I want to answer it. I don't want to wait.
I love it.
It's not how much we spend, it's how we spend it. And we know that in everything that we do, that just spending money on a problem does not solve the problem. And we've learned this now for decades. From today forward, it will not be the amount, it will be how it is allocated, who gets it. And that begins with every dollar being spent in the classroom. Because every dollar that's spent on the bureaucracy is a dollar that doesn't get into the hands of teachers and students. So that one's not difficult. And as I go through the data, you're going to see a lot of stuff here. And I'd be happy. And I know you got a difficult governor, but if the legislature is really committed to this, this is the kind of thing that I'm willing to do next year. So reach out to Lisa and potentially, I'm not going to make the commitment now, but I am going to make a potential offer. But you have to decide that you're really willing to fight it and you're going to win it, which means that some of our biggest problems are among Republicans who are too afraid of the union to do anything. And the truth is, they're the greatest obstacle to change because they do not represent students, they represent a union. And we forget that. But Ty, let's stay in touch on this. Let's do one more question. Come on, Carly, let's see what you look like. Stephen Roop, let's see what you look like. Joe, I've heard what you look like, and I want to see if it's true or not. So guys, let me see you all. Do you have one more question?
Okay, Kay Christopherson, do you want to jump in, or are you muted?
I can jump in. This is LePac in Oklahoma.
Great.
Frank, the thing we talk about a lot here is, how do you measure success? So these things that parents want, we always come back to testing, and there seems to be this real weight on an ACT score by the time you get to high school. How would you recommend we talk about that? Because we get all tangled up in, well, if we spent more money here or there, our test scores would go up. But there's also this undercurrent of disagreement over even how you decide whether or not you're producing. How can you say I'm a top 10 state on education without some metric? And a lot of us struggle with that.
There has to be a metric. And this is the thing that conservatives, the left, the progressives believe in effort. If you've got a good heart, then you're a good person. No matter how much money you waste, no matter how many decades you screw something up. If your intentions are good, you're okay. That's never been the way that I've had conservatism defined to me. We're about output, not input. We're about results, not effort. And so there has to be a sense of accountability, transparency. I'll give you the three words: accountability, transparency, and oversight. So the parents, and then there are three aspects to this, which is parents have the right to know exactly what their children are learning and whether or not they're learning what they should be. Students have the right to learn those things that will help them be happy, healthy, functioning adults. And education cannot be trapped in the past. It must be focused on the future. So if you want to set up your criteria, and Danny, I know you're on this call, please write down every question that I'm asked, because we're about to do another public opinion study. This will be with parents. And so I'm going to be able to get you the specific answers over the next 2 weeks or so for every one of your questions, which is going to encourage you to ask more. But I'll give you that. But Mark, if you opposed, and I know that there are a few people on the right who oppose testing, there is no way to demonstrate accountability if we don't quantify it in some way. Let us have the argument over what should be tested, but let's not have the argument over whether it should exist or not, because the only people who don't want tests to exist, other than a few people on the right, is everybody on the left. Because the union simply does not want to be held accountable for its teachers who are failing to provide me as an employer with kids who can write. It is my single greatest challenge. My students, I have to rewrite everything of every employee because it's pathetic. They can't write a simple sentence without making it grammatically incorrect or without saying in 20 words what they should have said in 8. So please, I'm begging you, the Washington does not have to define the test, because I know how anti-Washington you are, but don't eliminate it because you don't like it, how it's being administered. Without accountability, without knowing what our students can say back to us, we have no way of knowing if it's successful or not. So let me do
But I
this.
agree with that. I'm having trouble articulating that to deal with. And we in Oklahoma 4 years ago and 2 years ago had a lot of what I'll call education establishment folks get themselves elected. We had teacher walkouts. We had this fight over teacher pay raises, all that kind of stuff. And so you have a lot of status quo oriented folks in the legislature. And I'm searching for how to articulate these things because they're all in my party. Thank you.
Yes, it's a problem. And I'm getting some comments from people that I'm not responding because I'm focused on the language, but I appreciate the comments that you guys are sending to me. I just want you to know that I am reading them. And Lisa, I've got an idea for you, which is, because this is part of my new life, which is I'm not as scheduled as I used to be. Now, I'm not going to any place that's cold. So there's no way in hell I'm going to Chicago. If you want to invite me to North Dakota, I'm not coming. I'm not going to Montana. But Oklahoma, I might go to. If you would want to set up a way for me to pick 3 states that were trying to do education reform and are really dedicated to it, I'd actually take a week off this winter or early spring and spend a day in each community. So we can do a day in Oklahoma, we can do a day in Arizona, we can do a day in fill in the blank. But if that's something you'd want to do, that's something I'd be committed to doing. Now let me show you, let me go back. Here's the good news. This is the great news. We've been looking at this now for years. How open would parents and adults be, voters be, to making a change? This is the greatest data result I've had in 2020. Only 34% want to get back to the way things were as soon as possible. 2/3 want to rethink how to educate students, coming up with new ways to teach children. There has never been a greater groundswell of support for doing it differently right now. And you've got 4 months to get this done. You've basically got maybe even 5, but you're going to have to get this done by April. And that's why I want to find those of you who are ready to push. And frankly, Arizona, Oklahoma, you got a Republican governor, correct?
In Arizona, yeah. Or in Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. You find me the states that have a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, and let's go. Let's find 3 states that really want to do this. Lisa, help me.
Yep.
I'll give the time. We'll actually make some people work on Saturdays, and we'll come out to the states and we'll go through this 200 slide deck because we can make a difference. This is the time to do it. It's right now. And by the way, here's an example of language difference. I hear people use the word dream of the possibilities. The problem with the dream is it's by definition not real. Imagine allows you to think outside the box. Dream is not realistic. And so I'm looking at how to imagine the possibilities rather than dream. We have taken it down to the actual word itself. Now, if this isn't mind-blowing, I don't know what is, which is, let me put it so it's bigger here. The idea that 74%, 3 out of 4 parents from low-income families and 71% of parents overall, they would take their kid to a different school. If that's not the definition of failure, nothing is. And this is what we should track. Because if we have fixed schools, if we have fixed education, if we have done what we needed to do for students, parents will be satisfied and they won't try to get their kids out of where they are. That tells you how bad things are right now. And I want you to see, I know Republicans are 50-50. Now, this data is 5 years old, and we're going to update this over the next couple of weeks. Democrats absolutely see education as a right. I actually do, because I understand the failure, and you guys are going to yell at me for this. But when you have this percentage who think that it's a right, and look at that line below, is it fair that a child in Mississippi doesn't read or write or add or subtract at the same level as a child of Maine or Massachusetts? Because they aren't learning what those kids are learning. I know that I've probably stepped on a landmine here, but you try to defend that. Try to defend to parents who have their act together in Mississippi that their kids are 49th or 50th, and they are going to be next year and the year after that. And then explain to them that their kids are never going to get the job, are never going to get the same opportunities those kids from Maine or Massachusetts, because everybody knows that the schools there suck. Go defend it. I mean, this is my issue. I may be too radical for you all, because I want to tackle the schools in Mississippi. And I assume that there could be someone from Mississippi on this call right now. Your schools are failing, and they're failing in Arkansas, and they're failing in Alabama. And we have to make a change there. And I'm not saying that you have to raise taxes. I'm not telling you that you have to reallocate funds, because we know that you don't have to. But to accept that the schools in Republican-controlled areas are doing so badly is, to me, unacceptable. So I'm going to stop here and give any of you the chance to yell at me. Nobody?
Hi, yeah, I came a little late. Apologize, but you kind of gave me an in to say what's on my mind, and you're talking about big ideas and moving in the right direction. I think one of the biggest problems with our education system is the federal government's taken over education for the states, and I don't think that is a role of the federal government. I think that should be a state's issue, and let them deal with it the way they see best.
What state are you from?
Pardon me? State? Utah.
What state?
Utah.
Okay, Utah's a great example. You're committed to education. It's part of your faith. It's part of who you are. But you're going to tell me that a kid in Mississippi, and I want to get into it because then I can't do the language. Your state is a success story, but a lot of the states that we represent are not. And the federal government couldn't possibly make education any worse in Mississippi than what it is right now. Another question or comment?
Let me ask you this. Our WPU is one of the lowest in the nation. We get criticized for funding our kids one of the lowest, yet we still have fairly good results in our education. And so I don't think it's a matter of funding and that. I think it's just a matter of how you operate the education system.
Okay, so what's the language I gave you about 7 minutes ago?
I probably wasn't here. Why don't you tell me?
So I saw you because I commented that because you're the guy who I thought was a woman, and you're the guy who I thought was Chris Christopherson, because I saw you only for one moment. It's not what you spend, it's how you spend it. And Utah is living proof of this. And we don't need Washington telling us what to do. We have found a way, a good way, of allocating our limited resources efficiently. Here's your language for you guys: efficiently, effectively, and accountably. Efficiently, so we get more for less. Effectively, so we are producing kids with the skills they need to succeed in college, career, and life. You should write this down. I'm giving you the language right here. And accountably, so if our schools and our teachers fail, they're held responsible. That is the language of education, of a successful education system. And that is what will be most effective to you among those who are criticizing you that you don't spend enough.
In Oklahoma, we have an interesting challenge. Much of our area is rural, and we have probably more school districts per student per capita than most states. And so we talk a lot about spending our money differently. So you need to consolidate the districts, at least the administrative stuff, et cetera, et cetera. But it always shifts then to, well, wait a minute, the school's the largest employer out here. Suddenly it becomes a discussion about something different than educating your kids. And that's a tough thing in Oklahoma. Is help me with that.
That the issue of that's where money needs to be spent in the classroom and not on the bureaucracy. Why is it that and the other thing is, I would ask you, how much are the bureaucrats paid? One of the greatest initiatives that we've ever done, and I think it was drug induced, but the idea that no administrator should be paid more than the highest paid teacher. And that caused an immediate fight within the union, which is exactly what I want to do. The idea that why is the superintendent of schools being paid more than the best teacher in those schools? That's the argument that we want. And then the focus is on the student and on the classroom rather than on a full employment program. The stuff you're telling me, Oklahoma should be one of these 3 states. You are ripe for this, but you got to decide if you're willing to put up with this crap. And I understand why some people are not.
Hey, Frank, would you use the reimagine language because of that? Because we're trying to turn the Titanic and it's already hit the iceberg, right? I mean, are we reimagining education, reimagining student opportunities, right? With that percentage of people in favor, what's the language that starts to turn the ship?
It's a combination of reimagine and rethink and reimagine.
Because they're reimagining police, right? On the other side, does that taint it for us?
No, it does not. And the great thing about this is a Black Lives Matter. We want to address inequality. The way you address inequality, what is a better approach than focusing on education? Education itself, schools, learning, is the great equalizer. And if we fail there, we will fail in every stage of life. And also, we all know that if you have a decent school, you have lower crime, you have lower incarceration, you have lower of all the things we don't want in life, and we have higher levels of all the things we do want in life. This is an easy way to handle this. And I'm taking the language of the left and turning it on its head. I'm going to take the language that Black Lives Matter is using and turning it into education. If you're going to defund the police, which is about public safety, there's no better way to achieve public safety than a successful school system. Lisa?
Yeah, I was going to jump in. I don't know if this is an appropriate time or not, but there's so much discussion around civics education and the 1619 versus 1776. I know that the president has already, kind of built the 1776 commission to combat the 1619. How do we message that? Alec's going to be working on a civics education model policy at this meeting this week. How do we make sure that doesn't come off as being, slightly racist or out of touch with the conversations that are taking place?
So we looked at this, and this is, I've got stuff on it, but I want to duck it because I don't remember enough of the findings. But the public believes if you ask them what program would make the greatest difference in the civility and decency of our population and improving our participation and our effective engagement in our democratic process, the number one answer is civics education. And it doesn't matter whether you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat. What I don't remember is that there are some language differences because Democrats are thinking about fairness, social justice, and equality. Republicans are thinking about freedom and liberty and opportunity. So the language is different but between what we want with civics, but we have a consensus. And it's not just about our political process, it's also about the economy, which is why I need to emphasize for you all, it's not about promoting capitalism, it's about promoting economic freedom. How can our children become successful adults How do we strengthen our system of economic freedom, not capitalism? Capitalism reminds people of Wall Street, of profits, of shareholders, of big and multinational. Economic freedom reminds people of small business, of Main Street, of employees as well as employers, and the idea that if you work hard and play by the rules, you can get ahead. Economic freedom is the best way to describe our economic system, and capitalism is the worst. So I will add that to it. And you got to succeed in Oklahoma because I really want to do this. Okay, let's go back. I want to do specifically words now. I'm going to skip all this. These are the definitions of what the public is looking for. And we tried every possible way because these are the 6 topics that are so essential in any discussion of education. And what we have found is that this is the best way to describe them. The objective, how do we make public schools effective, motivating, and challenging? So from now on, whenever you talk about public schools, you talk about students, inspired, encouraged, and challenged. Those are the words. This is what we want from our schools. This is what we want from our teachers. We want them to be inspired, committed, and passionate. For a curriculum, we want it intellectually challenged and balanced. These are the words that work for each one of these. And I once again, it's like I'm on my knees. I'm begging you, take this language, just copy it. Because you're not going to find anything better than this, or the odds of you finding something better than this are not great. And each one of you has something that is unique to your state or your community, but this is how it works. Another example. We wanted to come up with a simple 1-page listing of all the phrases that work. And you guys wanted to know how you communicate the end product. The answer is simple: real, measurable results. That's what they're looking for. They want to know that the entire community is engaged in this effort. So that's where you talk about working side by side. They want to know that the information they're getting is accurate, which is why you don't talk about evidence-based, you talk about fact-based. And by the way, some of these words work in other conservative situations as well. Student-focused. We tried student-centered. We tried other phrases that are student-based, like student-based. And in the end, it was student-focused. Real-world situations, because they don't just want to learn theory. Parents want their kids to be able to function in real life, which is why real-world situations does so well. In terms of opening schools, safely and sensibly. The average American right now does not want strictly online learning, does not want a strictly face-to-face environment. They want a blended combination. And so the goal is to get those schools to open, but you need those other 2 words, safely and sensibly. Because in the end, if you're only appealing to Republicans or conservatives, you're not appealing to your state. Like, this might work in a Wyoming. It might work in it's weird because a state like Montana is very conservative and yet it elects Democratic statewide office holders. But I want you to be able to appeal across the spectrum. And that's why safely and sensibly are so important. Or that idea of believe in better, because in the end, they don't want just generic improvement. They want to know that every year their schools are getting better than they were the year before. So this is a whole set of language. I've got more, but once again, I'm going to go back to questions.
Hey, Frank, this is Will Davies with ALEC. It's not necessarily a question. It's more of a comment. My girlfriend is 24 and is a teacher at a Title I school in Birmingham, Alabama. And what you've been talking about is, I've kind of had to deal with it, and she has too, with the funding is something that's really hard for her as a teacher because everything is outdated. And she wants to provide the best experience for her students. And she's seen that she has been able to, she spends her paychecks on footballs and whatever so her kids can have fun. And she has seen a difference in, she's provided them with cool things that they can learn. For example, my grandfather bought this like Jeopardy trivia thing for her classroom so that they can have a fun game to review, and the students are responding really well because they want to learn, they want to come to school, because Miss Inez is fun and she gives us these things and she truly cares. So I just wanted to make that comment that everything that you're saying is, I've seen it in person, that her students want to come to school and not remote learn because of the opportunities that she is providing. And it's unfortunate it has to come from her paycheck, and the state isn't funding that, but it's made a real difference in her classroom this year.
And so and you asked a simple question from that. So I'm going to shorten whatever you said by 2/3, and then I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. Would you rather be spending money on an education bureaucrat who pushes paper across her desk? Would you rather be spending money in the classroom, engaging students, making them, inspiring them, and making them seek real knowledge and learning? That's the question that Alabama faces right now: another bureaucrat or an activity to engage and involve students. We need to be asking those questions, and there are rhetorical questions for each one of these that'll be successful for you. Another question. And by the way, Lisa, this is a very small turnout. I was expecting you to have more like 50 or 60 or 70 people. Should I take that this is not a priority?
No, not at all. I think that the education task force might be running on a time slot against this. So unfortunately, we have some of our education experts that are participating in that, doing the civics education.
Okay.
I want to call on John Willis or Nathan Cook to see if they've got questions, or Phil King, because I know that those are legislators from Iowa and Texas, and they might. We just had an education academy down in Texas where we're trying to encourage them in the same way that you're talking about, where we've got trifectas, encourage them to do a little bit more on the charters and choice side. Can you talk a little bit about education choice and whether you're seeing kind of a more of an appetite for that? I know that online learning is people want them in the classrooms, but is there anything you're seeing on shifting with education choice?
And Lisa, I'll defer to legislators. I stood in for our sponsor the other day at a meeting. I'm not a legislator, private sector, but from Rice University. So just very interested to listen to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
John, the world is watching you. We're waiting for you to participate. Don't feel nervous at all. That we all know that John Willis is on board.
I am on board. I do believe that we will have some movement this year towards more of a school choice. I don't know what that's going to look like. We haven't had our issues caucus, but we did increase 6 new members towards our majority. So we went from 53 to 59 in our House majority. We have almost a super majority in the Senate, almost a super majority in the House. And I think that we can do whatever we want towards school choice this year. I believe that's going to be even more likely because of the way the unions have ginned up the teachers this year towards a non-present school type thing. And it has really upset a lot of parents, and that in turn has upset a lot of legislators. I think that we have seen at least one Democrat legislator in the state lost her race because of school being open to in-present teaching. And so I wouldn't doubt there's probably been more legislators lost because of that. But those are my thoughts. I think that we will definitely be looking at school choice of some sort. I don't know what that's going to look like.
John, are you Iowa or Texas?
Iowa.
Okay, Lisa, I would pitch to you Iowa, Oklahoma, and Texas. They're both in the center of the country. They both have the trifecta. And and they're different communities. And Iowa, if you get this done, it's a great talking point for the 2024 election.
Yeah, I agree. And John just recently joined our ALEC board, so we're looking forward to working more with him. I think you remember Speaker Uppmeyer, who has retired, who will be retiring at the end of this year. And John is going to be our lead legislator in Iowa. So hopefully we can, if we can do Oklahoma and Iowa and Texas, I think that's great. And I think that Mark is going to announce to his retreat this weekend that you're interested in coming down. So I don't, if we can get that scheduled soon, we'll let you know, Frank.
Yeah, by the way, Mark, I've got this on every issue you're dealing with. I have this kind of language on budget, on taxes, on the environment, on welfare, on healthcare, but education is the one that I care most about. Okay, let me do one more set of slides for you so you can see what else exists. So in addition to this list of 21 words and phrases, there's also the phrases. There's also the longer. All children deserve an exceptional education. Every and all becomes so important, that number one and number two. The single greatest failure of conservatism in promoting school reform is that parents come to believe that this will help some students, but it won't help their student. And they will actually oppose reform if their student isn't included, which is why I know that we hate to use words of universality because of healthcare in the 1990s, universal healthcare. But they need to know that every student, and really it's all students in every community, are going to be affected. Teaching students how to think and communicate is an absolute priority to parents. We may not be thinking about it. We may be thinking about reading, writing, and arithmetic, but for them, thinking and communicating tells them that their kids are going to be productive adults. We have to emphasize that everything that we're doing is proven. It's a proven and effective education strategy. By the way, one of the greatest criticisms of the movement right now is that it's all gone corporate. The idea that don't let Wall Street make a profit off of your children. It's a very powerful argument. It did not exist 10 years ago. It's brand new. So it has to be clear that when you're having greater choice, it's not adding a profitability motive. It's simply giving parents the right to choose the school that's best for them. Number 12, rewarding effective schools and holding failing ones accountable. 82% of Americans support that. And yet we're not doing it in almost any community in America. There isn't a subsegment of American society that disagrees with that statement. And yet it's impossible for us to get it through. Equipping students for the real world. That is the highest priority for Black and Latino parents, because they want this. They really want the idea that their kids are prepared for real life. So I would say real life in the real world. I would actually add to it. And just so you see that there's much more like this. Respect, reward, and retain effective teachers. And then I've got also the warnings about what the danger. Don't talk about vouchers and don't talk about school choice. It's far better for them to be grants or scholarships. One size does not fit all is a much better statement than we should be rewarding innovation. So part of this presentation is not just what to do, it's also what not to do, what not to say. Look at that innovation, how badly it does. It does half as well as one size does not fit all. Different students have different needs. So we're trying to figure out what is absolutely the best way to respond to each one of these attacks. And here's an example of where innovation just does not do well. So I'll take one more question. Anybody? Am I boring you? Yes, so. Lisa, you're still mute?
Yeah, I was thinking that Kim Coleman might have a question also from Utah.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Frank. I could sit at your feet all day because it really is frequently wars of words and in what works and what doesn't. Was just in another workshop on students on our campus, our higher education campus things, and there's so much of this that overlaps. So we are just starting in Utah. We just passed the law for tax credit scholarship grants, and so this is very, very relevant to us. But what we've done is looked at the other states who have already done this, and they said just because you pass this law, don't stop there. The fight is just starting for you. The groups are going to continue to come after you. They're going to continue to want to restrict these scholarships. They're going to want to limit the scope of the beneficiaries. They're going to want to cap your donors. They're going to want to dox your donors, which is another topic for later today. So, so just that we might get there and start that conversation in our state. How do we just continue to strengthen that and continue to be able to wage this fight? And I don't know if I missed this already. I apologize for jumping in late here, but the opportunities that we have right now because of COVID, that people are so frustrated, and do we just have a ripe opportunity now? You know, if there's probably never been a better opportunity to say the public education emperor has no clothes.
Yeah,
And
that's how we started this. Actually gave you the data that by 2-1, the public wants to make that change.
Right.
So yes, you're correct. The best way to do that is through proof points. And what happens is people pass the legislation and then they assume they don't have to defend it. And so they go away. Every month, month after month, you need to have more proof points, more stories, more examples of people whose lives were changed by this legislation. And you keep on it and keep on it. And you actually start at the very beginning. As soon as you've got the capability to be able to say, this is the difference that this legislation is making. And once you've done that for 2 years, then you actually can sit back. We know that cancer, for example, that if you've gone 2 years and you're cancer-free, you've basically been cured. Doesn't mean it doesn't come back 10 years later, a different cancer. But you need 2 years of success stories to be able to make a program, an education program, strong enough that it can sit on its own. And one of the greatest responsibilities, and Alex should put out messaging on this, is what to do in the days after the legislation is passed to demonstrate that it was the right decision. And then you're correct, it is so vital. So Lisa, I'm going to turn it back to you. And I hope this is helpful. And I'm going to see some of you guys this afternoon to talk about the workplace environment.
Well, thank you very much. I do see Ken Whaler, who's a newly re-elected legislator who was out for a term and now back. I just want to make sure I give him the opportunity to say hello if he wants to. He might be muted at this point. Oh, now you're muted.
Thank you. I'm trying to jump around and hear so many different things here. I appreciate hearing. Sorry I didn't get into more of it. I was tied up in another one, but I always like to hear from Dr. Frank Luntz. He has some very good information always. Thank you.
Hey, Ken, what state is he from?
New Hampshire.
Oh, well, so I'm not going to visit your state at least until the 1st of June.
Anytime.
He was part of the sweep of Governor Chris Sununu this year, which was amazing to watch. So an amazing outcome, and led by a great gubernatorial candidate who's speaking at our lunch session today. So, well, thank you very much, Frank. And we will take these, your slides, Frank, and share them around. I'm also back channeling with our friends in Oklahoma and Ohio and Texas. Phil King has got 2 sessions going right now. So he says they would love to host you as well. So we might have plans for Iowa, Texas, and Oklahoma coming out of this, which is fantastic.
And if you add Iowa to it, I was actually on the phone with the governor there for 25 minutes yesterday, just him and I. So that's another place where you've got the triad of people.
Yep, the trifectas are amazing, and we will absolutely focus on that. We want to thank Dr. Luntz for joining us today, and hopefully you can all chime in later on this afternoon. I think it's at 4:30 to 5:30 this afternoon for his session on workforce development. Thank you very much.